Okay. Polar ice caps melting, sea levels rising, longer and stronger droughts than ever before. We've all heard about these things, but how bad is it actually? Um, for decades, scientists have tracked the effects of human waste on Earth's environment and ecosystem. Global climate change has already had observable effects on the environment, and glaciers have shrunk. Ice rivers and lakes are breaking up earlier. Plant and animal ranges are shifted, and trees are flowering sooner. Effects of global climate change. Oh, sorry. Effects of global climate change. Oh, sorry. Effects that global climate change that scientists predicted years ago are happening now. So their predictions are proving to be pretty accurate. And the sea levels are rising and ice caps are melting, and we're experiencing a lot more frequent and intense heat waves. Within the 20th century, Earth's temperature has increased a global average of 1% or 1 degree Fahrenheit, as NASA reports in a 2017 study or data collection. 1 degree may not sound like a lot, but within the span of a century, it's pretty significant. Over the past 2.5 million years, the average global temperature has only changed between 5 and 6 degrees Fahrenheit. So, 1 degree within a century is very significant. It's shown that really small changes in temperature correspond to really enormous changes within the environment. So, for the global average to rise an entire degree once again in 100 years is an anomaly and should certainly call attention to the severity of our situation. Most climate scientists agree that the main cause of global warming is to do with the greenhouse effect, warming that results when the atmosphere traps heat radiating from Earth. So a lot of the heat comes from the sun, and here's a graph of the average global temperature within the past 30 years. So the greenhouse effect, CO2 and other gases trap heat within the atmosphere, making life possible on Earth. However, the atmosphere keeps much of the atmosphere keeps much of the naturally provided traps. The atmosphere keeps much of the naturally produced heat and gases in to our benefit, setting a pleasant and survivable environment. But too much of the greenhouse gases, like CO2, cause more of the heat to stay in, and so with the burning of fossil fuels and oil, this produces a lot of CO2 in excess, more than the Earth needs, and so the heat gets stuck within our atmosphere, heating up the Earth. Many have attributed the global warming effect to solar radiance, which is the decrease in solar energy. So basically people saying the greenhouse effect isn't what's warming Earth. But if the warming were caused by a more active sun, we would expect to see warmer temperatures in all layers of the atmosphere, but instead we're seeing cooling in the outer layers, so the exosphere and the thermosphere, and then warming within the stratosphere and troposphere, and then on the ground too. So it's not equal, as we would see if the sun were outputting more energy. So though much of the problem is miles above in the atmosphere, climate change is seen in all areas of the ecosystem. The world's tropical reef ecosystems and the people who depend on them are increasingly affected by climate change. Since the 1980s, rising sea surface temperatures owed to global warming have triggered unprecedented coral bleachings, and this is the Great Barrier Reef, which is what is the biggest coral reef in the ocean, and as you can see, a lot of it is being bleached, and due to the rising temperature of the ocean water, and this causes most of the coral to die, which really affects the ecosystem, as a lot of sea life rely on the coral reef for survival, and this affects us with fishing, so food and economy. In a journal titled Nature Climate Change by P.C. Milley and K.A. Dunn, they write that the thermal stress during marine heat waves disrupts the symbiotic relationship between the corals and their algal symbionts, causing corals to lose their color. So that's kind of a scientific explanation of why that's happening. And then, like I said, most of the bleached corals are physiologically damaged and end up dying. So obviously many of these problems are greater than just one individual, and while there are things that we as individuals can do to aid the future and the future of our planet, it's important to know that there are solutions, and it's not too late to recover from the damage that we've done. The biggest source of data is biggest source of data and analysis of Earth's climate change is NASA. While its role isn't to set climate policy or prescribe particular solutions, its purview includes providing the scientific data needed to understand climate change and what we can do to fix it and stop it. Most of this data is really easily accessible through data.gov, which is just a it's a government site, but within the climate data initiative section, there are a lot of great resources, such as the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, which is also online, which provides scientific tools. That's more plural, sorry. Okay, yeah, so provides scientific tools, information, expertise to help people manage their climate-related risks, and then data.gov, like I said, and then the NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also provides a lot of information. So it's important to be aware, and all of these sites provide solutions as well. So mitigation, which is reducing climate change, involves reducing the flow of heat-trapping gases into the atmosphere. The goal of mitigation is to avoid significant human interference with the climate system and quote, stabilize greenhouse gas levels in a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystems to adapt naturally to climate change, ensure that food production is threatened, and enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. That's from, end quote, and that's from the 2014 report on mitigation of climate change from the UN at the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, page 4. We see this in a push for the use of solar and wind energy, as these are completely sustainable and will long run more economically efficient and beneficial. The global climate is projected to continue to change over the next century, and the magnitude and intensity of which depends on the amount of heat-trapping gases emitted within the next century. If nothing is done, we could be facing really detrimental and irreversible effects and catastrophes. And we see this in the intensity and frequency of the North Atlantic hurricanes, as well as the frequency and the strongest hurricanes, as they've all increased since the 1980s. And here's a quick 16-minute video from right now to 1950 to 2095 on how bad the droughts will get if we don't stop the CO2 emissions. And basically, what that's saying is we'll be completely out of water in most of North America. So Ben Cook, a climate scientist at NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, says that, quote, natural droughts like the 1930s Dust Bowl and the current drought in the Southwest have historically lasted maybe a decade or less. What these results are saying is that to get a drought similar to those events, we're going to get a drought similar to those events, but it's probably going to last between 30 and 40 years, which would be ridiculous. So as spoken before, no single individual is capable of stopping climate change. However, we as a society and collective people can make a difference. Each of you can be conscious about your daily effect on the environment and the impact you're having on the planet. Be energy efficient. We've all been told this as kids: switch the light off, turn the water off when you're brushing teeth. But you can also change light bulbs to compact fluorescents and LEDs, unplug computers, TVs, and other electronics when not used. Wash your clothes in cold or warm water, not hot. It's And then hang dry when not necessary, because dryers actually use up a very significant amount of energy. And go solar. It's expensive, but it actually, you save money over time in the long run. So every act completed with the environment in mind, big or small, helps, and everyone can